Good
and
morning, Mr.
Senior Counsel Keith
Stevens.
Scotland.
Good morning, Mr.
Morning,
Khan. Good
Senior.
morning. Good morning.
Morning, Senior.
Mr.
My
Stevens, do not let us air our business in public. I will
my
speak to you
MP,
after.
my MP,
I did
full
not see
100.
you. I did not see you last Sunday, sir.
No, well, I told you why, right?
Yes, you did. You did.
All right.
Mr. Raghubar Singh, how are you?
I am good. I'm good, sir. Good to see you. Good to see
Senator
you.
Richards, good morning.
Good morning, Senior Minister. Or
Well,
Minister
you have to
Senior.
wearing so many hats now.
Don't be like that, gentlemen.
We appreciate you being with us this morning. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I know your portfolio has become even more expanded now, so your time is so much less.
I have time for things that are important.
I appreciate
time.
that. We appreciate that. First of all, how do you feel about your new appointment? Congratulations on your senior counsel elevation, first of all.
Oh, yeah.
We hadn't
Oh,
spoken to you
yes,
online
indeed.
since that.
Yes,
I
Senior.
realize it took
So
something
congrats
else
on
to
that.
bring me on your program, but
I have
thank
not
you.
heard one person discount your worthiness of that.
For sure, eh?
Not one person. As a matter of fact, on both sides of the aisle, persons have said privately and publicly that you are well deserving of that.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Which is not the same for everybody, but that's another conversation.
Mr. Richard, you just had to say that, right?
So tell us how you feel about that conversation, about your elevation to the position of minister in the Ministry of National Security and your assignment from the Prime Minister.
I was very humble, and then when I understood the nature of the task, I put on my seatbelt and I said, get down to it immediately. There is no honeymoon period. There's no gestation period. It is just hit the road running. But that is something that would have informed my entire career. I remember when I first hung up my shingles more than 20 years ago. One of the first cases that I had to do was a very, very significant case in law as it relates to the lawful chastisement of a child. And I did my research with Mr. Ken Saga, God rest his soul, and I literally hit the ground running. And he said to me, because I was able to prevail in that matter, and he said to me when I came back and I was about to celebrate, he said to me, celebrate very, very quickly. You are as good as your last case. And that has been the advice. He allowed me to celebrate for about 5 minutes, and then he said, buckle down, you're as good as your last case.
Well, you've won some big matters just prior to you taking up the appointment as minister. I know of a couple of them. You know, but what exactly, I mean, because I don't think it has been clear yet exactly what entails your portfolio now. It was said that you're in charge of the police service, but what exactly does that mean?
Well, in charge meaning the commissioner of police is in charge of the police service. What it means is that my focus in national security, one of my focus includes the police service. My foci includes the police service, immigration, money laundering, and those related issues, white-collar crime.
Okay, well, thanks for clearing that up. I didn't realize immigration was also part in there with you.
Yes.
All right.
That's very interesting. As your recent incarnation as chair of the Joint Select Committee on National Security, both the police service and the Customs and Excise Division would have come before us in the last couple months and years. Both have, by their own contributions in those committees being questioned by the committee, come up short in many areas.
Yes.
The police service, in terms of the commissioner, not only this commissioners passed about the targets and the lack of meeting of those targets and meeting of some targets in some instances, to be fair. And Customs and Excise, with tours of your predecessor in that committee, Minister Hines, now Minister of National Security, and also the tours we had of ports, including the Port of Port of Spain, Plebdeco and the airport. And the glaring gaps we've seen, even more recently, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Finance came to the Parliament and reported about the anomalies at the port of Port of Spain. It's interesting that both yourself and Minister Hines were chair of that National Security GSC and saw firsthand the deficiencies in critical agencies in national security in Trinidad and Tobago. How do you intend to use that information and that first-hand knowledge and interface with those agencies to close those significant gaps?
The first thing that I will address is the optimization, the usage of the resources provided to those agencies and the lack of using them for the purpose. Mr. Richards, Senator Richards, you will recall when we went to the port with respect to scanners, and we actually visited the port itself. Do you recall where that scanner that was hit by the vehicle, it was a forklift, was located? The government provided a scanner in one of the warehouses. Yes, gentlemen, there is a scanner that is in the most remote corner of the warehouse. And we were told that a forklift, you remember that, Senator Richards? We were walking and it was damaged and not repaired. And I took a deep breath because I was wondering, how could a vehicle, in this case a forklift, leave an entire warehouse of some 7,000 square foot at least and find that scanner in a remote corner and have it
on more than one occasion, Minister?
Yes, every time we purchase the scanner, that happened. So it means then that there's something going on relative to the optimization of our resources. I intend to use the information coming from the Joint Select Committee on National Security to address those issues. That remains etched in my mind because, Senator Richard, I think you and I were walking together when we saw that, and we both looked at it and said, how could a forklift, what would a forklift be doing in this area? It means that there are serious fundamental issues that we need to address as it relates to critical aspects of national security, which includes the customs and excise.
Well, the question will arise, Minister, that your colleague, the Minister of Finance, is responsible as line minister for customs and excise. Would that not be correct?
He is.
So the question could arise in the same cabinet. There's a minister, high-ranking minister, responsible for customs and excise through the Ministry of Finance. But these things are happening and the deficiencies continue because when your predecessor and I toured the port, even before you became the chairman of that committee, a lot of the issues remained. So the question is going to arise in the same cabinet and cabinet ministers talking about these issues. And at what point does it move from the persons operating inside to the PS financially and in other ways responsible for the agencies, to the government ministers holding them accountable in terms of policy and delivery in the same government?
My answer to that, and the Minister of Finance doesn't need me to defend him, but how does a minister, any minister in any ministry, deal with an issue like that? The responsibility of the minister would have been to provide that scanner. That was done. It was done. What transpired thereafter is that forklift left where it had to leave and just totally put that scanner out of operations. You cannot, by any stretch of the imagination, put the blame or lay the blame for that at the feet of the minister. It means then that there are things happening in there that needs the attention of the day-to-day operations of that issue. That one stuck in my memory because of the quaintness of that occurrence. I still have cognitive dissonance understanding that one.
Minister, let me add another layer to that. The other issue that came up in that inquiry, and this is why this is so confusing to me, and I'm not saying the minister is directly responsible for operations, but at the end of the day, there are ways the minister can hold the authorities responsible. What also happened that was diverse to us is that customs authorities failed to put in motion procurement processes for the timely procurement of a new scanner, leaving a
Well,
gap. So how does all of this continue to happen, leaving that port so vulnerable?
that was not, again, if you recall, when we interrogated further, those things were put in place. But let us say, and we do not admit at all that that is the case, because we understand that they are on the way, they have been purchased. But what we would want to do now is to engage in the day-to-day operations to ensure that what happened there, maybe putting the cameras in that port to see what is happening. Because what we want to do is to avoid, and this was not the first time, you were correct, that scanner was damaged accidentally. And maybe deterrence and putting measures in place to see what is going on. That may be an issue that has to be addressed, but it is not fair to say that the issue of the scanners have not been dealt with, because they have procured them, and I think that they are coming very shortly. But when they come very short, let's say they come today, what will prevent another driver of a forklift to leave the entire 7,000 square foot area of that warehouse and accidentally put out, and it was totally put out of commission? Because when we inquired whether it could have been repaired, if you recall, the answer was no. They had to get a new one. So not only was it damaged, gentlemen, it was damaged to the point that you could not use it anymore.
Well, Minister, hear what, because I'm listening to this, right? And I'm saying, where do we separate the issue of a minister in charge of customs in terms of the Minister of Finance and the fact that we may have had possible criminal activity? Who investigates that? Surely not is it that the customs officials themselves, or does that fall under the ambit of the police commissioner in that case?
It certainly will fall under the ambit either of the controller of customs internally, and if there's criminal activity, the commissioner of police. But in those circumstances, you would need more evidence. You would need more input to show that the damage was malicious circumstantially. When you look at what transpired, I'm just using that as a microcosm of what we are facing. You have to get physical and actual real evidence to show that the resources that was put in for a specific purpose was damaged, and the official report is accidentally. So you certainly cannot lay blame for that to the Honorable Minister. And any other questions?
No, I wasn't intending to blame him on the minister, minister. And someone is saying, does Paul expect the Minister of Finance to stand guard? No, I don't, obviously. No. But at the end of the day, if the minister is providing resources and through curious occurrences, the equipment is being damaged or not used or turned on and off conveniently, the minister had the power to initiate an investigation through the police.
Yeah. I don't think that is correct, but in any event, let us find solution. The solution has to be that the controller internally will initiate her internal inquiries, and if necessary, the police comes in, and that will apply across the board to any ministry. But that one stood out in my mind because what it showed is that the government is providing resources, but we are being stymied.
Minister, I want to, I want to segue straight into the issue of the police commissioner and her issues, well, whoever that may be, in terms of discipline in the police service and rogue officers at all levels, because they are at the junior level and they are at the senior level. How, because my feeling, this is my personal view, that if you can't fix this country's crime problem, if you don't fix your internal issues, and the police have a lot of internal issues, how are you going to assist? And I know that you, and I trust that you can, I know that you can, in terms of getting this sorted out with the police service?
The first answer to that lies in the structure of discipline in the police service. You would know, of course, that there's the internal structure, but you will also know that the powers to discipline also lies with the commission, and that is the makeup of our constitution, We are in the process now of constitutional review, and maybe the time has come for there to be more direct control of discipline internally in the police service, and making it more amenable to, one, early interdiction, two, quick resolution of the issues that attend to those police officers. If you have, for example, the internal police disciplinary process, the persons who sit on those tribunals, they are not permanent. So they will sit maybe once a week, twice a week. That does not augur well for the timely disposition of these matters. So it means then, gentlemen, that maybe the time has come for the rethinking of our constitutional arrangements as it relates to these things.
So is it then that we probably could see a revamping or retooling of the Professional Standards Bureau, which is an arm within the police service, yes, to investigate police officers?
And that
I thought they were going good.
Not just I thought they were going good until to do it in a timely fashion, to have these matters dealt with, maybe put the members of that bureau who sits on the tribunal as permanent. So what they do, at least until the backlog has been dealt with.
Yeah. But Minister, how is it? How is your intersect with the TTPS going to work? Let's say even in that example, is it that you would make recommendations? I understand the part from resourcing the TTPS, because you would have a direct line to the Minister of Finance, as much as anybody could have a direct line to the Minister of Finance. But you would, the Minister of Finance is the one who provides the financial resources, and you can be that middleman in terms of whatever the resource allocation that is required from the TTPS. But how much else can you really get involved? Because you're right, there is the Police Service Commission.
Yes, there is. But as it relates to resourcing, I can tell you that on Wednesday last, I met with the commissioner and 3 DCPs, and one of the DCPs was the one in charge of administration operations. And we did ask, and of course, I've read the manpower report done by Professor Diosaran. I've read it from cover to cover. And there are issues in there that would need addressing from a funding standpoint. And the intersect would be having that information in hand to be delivered and to the minister, and asking for, in these areas, in this time, particular investment in certain areas. But then we go back, and I use the example of that scanner. What happens after that? What happens when we invest in new vehicles? Will those vehicles be used for the purpose that it has been, they've been allotted? You would know, gentlemen, on Tuesday, 4 vehicles were handed over to the Pradial Larceny Squad, bringing it up to 9. In other words, for the areas that they represent, on the areas that they oversee, they would have vehicles for all those areas. Now what is left to be seen is how that will be put into action in order to reduce Pradial larceny, incidents of Pradial larceny, now that the resources have been provided. So we are trying to provide the resources. I certainly will make recommendations from what I have read to the relative to the manpower issues in the police service. I am getting some more feedback from the DCP in charge of that by Wednesday, and there'll be recommendations made, because if there is a need, we will hope that we can, as far as reasonably practicable, fund those needs to get them on the road, because, gentlemen, crime is not our friend, and time is not our friend as it relates to crime.
It might be worth your while to getting a report from the police commissioner about all these matters that are being currently investigated by the internal department.
Because that is something that is very essential, because we don't want the investigations to linger. It is either the officers, we need the matters to come to some resolution, and that is why I suggested that the members who sit on those panels, those tribunals, after the investigation, at least for now, be made permanent, or some other arrangements be made, so that they don't sit once a week, that they sit maybe every day. They would have other duties, because if you would know that the members are police officers themselves.
Yes.
But we may need just to take them off of their duties, let them do that, or allocate 8 hours a day to do that and do their other work. But it is important that we, what is the word? That we sanitize as far as we can the police service so people will have confidence in the police service. Member Richards, you would know, Senator Richards, you would know that as part of the inquiry into criminal activity and crime in Trinidad and Tobago, one of the issues was the confidence of the public and the level of confidence that the public had in the police service, if you recall that.
Yes, and one of the issues that came up with the public confidence and trust in the police
Yes.
service, this is an issue I raised over and over again, is something as technologically pervasive as the issue of body cams. And
Yes.
over and over, in the past couple of years, I have asked commissioner after commissioner about the policy, and they are on record as saying it is part of standard operating procedure. Yet, when there are high stakes encounters, when police are going on planned operations, where one would imagine there should be the use of body cams for accountability and to verify the accounts of the officers, which very often are different to bystanders and members of the public, we don't seem to see police consistently wearing body cams. We have all kind of excuses. First, it was we have to train. First, we don't know body the race coming up for them. Then it had the batteries only last an hour, and a plethora of excuses. Most
life
recently,
of the batteries, yes.
Most recently, that encounter in St. Augusta, when you were the chair, I asked the commissioner in that situation where 4 men died. The reports were that there was an exchange of gunfire and an open fire on police, and the police returned fire and the men died. And when I asked the commissioner if body cams were employed, because that was a planned operation, the commissioner wasn't aware. When I asked DCP, is it Suzette Martin?
Yeah.
Operations, who was on site, who hosted a press conference right after the incident, she was not aware. And when you hear things like that, the public gets a sense, well, I get a sense that there's a reluctance from officers to consistently wear body cams. How are you going to deal with that if that is indeed an issue? If the issue is batteries, why did they procure batteries that only last an hour when body cams are used all over the world and the batteries last 4 and 6 hours, etc.? That to me is a classic example of if there's a change of that and we see something as simple as that, or seemingly as simple as that, being consistently applied, there is accountability and there's a potential for building public trust and confidence.
There is the departmental order that dictates that body cams ought to be worn in certain circumstances. I would respectfully, without crossing any boundaries, give an advice as it relates to that. You know what the position I took at the JSC, National Security, and that position has not changed. And more importantly, the wearing of the body cams will be in certain sensitive and critical exercises, will be a buffer for the police service as it relates to maybe spurious and unfounded allegations of overstepping. So it's a means of protection, but it also is a means of giving to the public at least the feeling of confidence in the police that they did things properly. In other words, the body cam are there for rationale, and this rationale is twofold. One, to protect the police service from unfounded allegations. Two, to instill confidence that things went properly. And I think that the departmental order ought to be enforced, and I will give a respectful advice without overstepping any boundaries.
One of the issues that came up also is the fact that there seems to be, and it speaks to Wenda's question about the disciplinary procedure and the tribunal that you outlined earlier on, and the reluctance, it seems, from the police leadership to deal with these matters because in local parlance, the Freight Court.
I do think that is a fair commentary on it, but what I think could happen is a more robust prosecution, and as I mentioned before, even the internal process, we need to have that speeded up. And if an internal allegation crosses the line as a criminal activity, then by all means, our position at the JSC Senator Richards was charge. Let the courts decide what, and let the chips lie where they fall.
Your remit as announced by the Prime Minister to me is quite extensive. Police service, immigration, customs, and also you mentioned money laundering and white collar crime.
Yes.
Those, I mean, those are very, very expansive areas and critical areas in national security and citizen security. Could you speak a bit to the issue of white collar crime and what exactly your remit is where that is concerned? Because we don't have the Office of the HE, we have POCA, Proceeds of Crime Law, we have, yet there doesn't seem to be, and I could be wrong, you could correct me if I'm wrong, the kind of assertiveness in weeding out white collar crime, which is really in many people's estimations at the foot of the blue collar crime and the ground crime we're seeing, where the funders, the persons who bring in the containers with the guns, never seem to be caught or never seem to be held accountable. The persons who are washing money through so-called legitimate businesses never seem to be brought to account. And those are the issues where the cycle of crime is funded, but those funders of crime are not being, to me, brought to the criminal justice system as much as we would presume, given what the assertion is by experts of the level of underground economy in this country with dirty money.
That is an area that I'm acquainting myself with it with a different lens, and that is an area that we will be looking at. Obviously, there would be sensitive issues related to that, which I will not be allowed to discuss in this forum. But certainly, we know that white collar crime is something that ought to be looked at. I declare that at one point in time I was involved as defense attorney in one of the airports inquiry. I represented at least one of the persons charged. But if you know that matter, Airport 1, is still going on, whilst in the United States of America, persons who were charged that have just not finished their cases, but they've done their time and come out.
And paid back money too.
Delay in the system 25 years now. So it's really something that needs to be dealt with. Of course, you would, from my experience, you would know that some of those persons, and there's the presumption of innocence, will have the resources to have tangential challenges to these things, meaning by judicial review, by constitutional motions. So all these things are aspects that you will have to look at as it relates to the prosecution of white collar crime. We have the example of the airport case, and that is something that is live before us, and I think we would learn from our experiences. And I certainly will bring my little experience that I have in that area in that aspect, particularly of white collar crime and money laundering. It has been said sometimes that it's the new act of terrorism. Very quiet, but very, very pernicious and insidious.
But Minister, the Prime Minister, in giving you this portfolio of the TTPS, Immigration, Customs and Excise, has he in fact done a kind of reshuffle and demoted the previous complete Minister of National Security? Or I shouldn't look at it through that lens?
It is not correct. You ought not to look at it through that lens. The Ministry of National Security is a vast ministry dealing with several other issues. You would know that the Honorable Minister has retained his portfolio of Minister of National Security. I do not see it as a demotion in any way. I do not see it as a reshuffle. What I see it as is the utilization of a resource that the Honorable Prime Minister perceived that he had in order to assist in the ministry. And my role is to do exactly the task that was given to me by the Honorable Prime Minister. So, in short, the answer is no. And in long, the answer is there's a collaborative effort to attack and address the issue of criminal activity in Trinidad and Tobago. Gentlemen, let me give you an example. And to use the laws that we have now. My experience, and I'm understanding it now, in the courts are, we know when you are charged with an offense, you go to court, and the first thing that you do is the issue of bail, correct? Do you know if you are charged with the possession of firearms and ammunition, and you do your matter summarily, there's a fine of $500,000 and imprisonment for 15 years. And if you go before a judge and a jury, or a judge alone, if you are convicted, the term that you are liable to is 20 years. That is one, and that is section 6(1). There's the other charge. You know that if you are charged with possession of firearm with intent to injure, and that goes to the shootings that are occurring throughout the country under section 12, the penalty is imprisonment for life. I intend to liaise with the police investigators, the complainants who bring these matters before the court. Because when bail, and this is the practical aspect that I bring to this ministry, when bail is being canvassed before either the district judge, which is the magistrate, or a judge in chambers, the prosecution's view is sought. We will be taking, and I will be advising, of a more robust approach, one, to bail not being punitive, because the raison d'etre of bail is to ensure that the persons attend court, but we will be insisting, based on the prevalence of the offense and the seriousness of the offense, we will be insisting in some instances of no bail, or very, very serious bail with reporting conditions that will allow the police to keep track of those persons. As it relates to sentencing, I have to the forefront of my mind the principles of sentencing as outlined in R.V. Benjamin, and I'm just saying because it's in my head. 1967 11 West Indian reports at page 389, and the 5 principles are: deterrent of the particular offender, deterrent of like-minded offenders, the penal aspect, the rehabilitative aspect, and the general aspect that the court is considering of sentencing. When it comes to sentencing, we intend, and I intend to advise, and it's a respectful advice, that the views of the prosecution, if it's before the magistrate, be held and be given to the magistrate, which is the district judge, and if it's before the high court, through the police complainant to the prosecutor, that the views of the prosecution be given to the judge, whose sole discretion, of course, it is to make a sentence, but within the parameters of the limit that the law gives. So if they give you life imprisonment as the ultimate sanction, and you're a second-time offender, what will be the submission before the court in order to adhere to the principle of, one, deterrent to the particular offender, and the deterrent to like-minded offenders? As the law operates, Mr. Raghubar Singh, and you would know that, in every matter, there's one aspect of sentencing that would be more prevalent, or that will be more significant. So, for example, for young offenders, the court may consider rehabilitation as the most important consideration. However, for repeat offenders, you would likely look at the concept where rehabilitation hasn't worked, deterrent of this repeat offender, and also the deterrent of like-minded offenders. So this is what we would bring to the process in order to inform the court, so they can know that
I'm a
there's
little,
a more robust approach.
yeah, Minister, I'm a little puzzled though. And aren't you, in a sense, kind of stepping on the toes of the DPP in terms of you saying, adding some level of advice, and I'm calling it liberally advice, to the prosecutorial team?
Absolutely not. The constitutional remit of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution will not in any way be infringed. How I describe it is as for, and this is the practical aspect of it. When you go and someone is charged, initially, there is the aspect of bail, correct?
Yes.
They will ask the prosecution, what are your views? Without overstepping any boundaries, there will be a view expressed by the police complainant, that certainly in matters of firearm offenses, that will be advanced to the court. As it relates to sentencing.
Okay, if you could pause right there, if I can answer. when you say there will be a point of view expressed by the police complainant,
Yes.
is it at your insistence?
No.
Or is it that that's the normal rote process of the police complainant and they are always entitled to seek advice from the DPP's office because ultimately it comes under the DPP? So when you say that, when you say it, it seems to me as if you're stepping into that realm and you're not yet convincing me that you're not.
Let me make it pellucidly clear. The police will be asked for their views as it relates to offenses, the one that I've just read out, for example, possession of firearm with intent to injure, section 12. There will be a very respectful advice as it relates to the prevalence of this type of offense in the country now, and that position will be communicated to the prosecutor as it relates to their input as it relates to bail. And I think that that is very allowable and not at all stepping on anybody's toes or not at all infringing on the independent discretion of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. If you say to me, well, hold on, if you say to me, well, you appear to be pushing the envelope, the answer to that is no, we are within our bounds to express our views relative to the prevalence and the scourge of these type of offenses. And if there's a perception that there is a pushing of the envelope, my respectful advice or my respectful position on that will be that these times that we are in now calls for a more robust approach, and the views of the police complainant, which is sought in all matters, will be made known to the prosecutor.
Yeah.
It is
Minister,
just views.
Yeah.
Well,
I actually think the envelope needs to be pushed, but I want to ask this quickly. Is it because you are a minister in the Ministry of National Security, is there a requirement for you to consult first with the substantive minister before any sort of policy decisions are developed, like what you are speaking now?
Even if there wasn't, and we say, and I make no pronouncement on that, there's always in every policy decision, it is not a one-man show. So obviously, there will be consultation on all issues, But what will happen is that consultation, that focus will be done in a more timely manner because of what we are facing today. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
You know,
so you
Minister,
are also in the cabinet, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Right.
Yeah. Minister, as immigration and customs and excise also comes under you, this is something that we have discussed on this program. The issue of immigration forms,
Oh God,
which was supposed to be dispensed with a few years ago, and you are a well-traveled person, so that you
and
know
a well-filled out form. He must have filled out hundreds of forms.
But
I
you
do.
But you know, there are many countries that you don't have to fill out a form anymore.
No, you don't. You don't.
And so Trinidad seems a little bit behind in terms of that. In addition to which, you have countries that have much more active national threats against them, like, for example, the United States. Yet, when you enter the United States, a lot of the times, there's a lot of intelligence operating behind the scenes, so you can just collect your suitcase and leave. You don't have to confront a customs officer by the green line saying, what you buy? You buy any gifts? How much alcohol you purchase?
Well, Richard, they're not even stamping your passport sometimes when you enter the United States.
Well,
and I'm just saying, is there room for modernization of those processes?
Well, one, Mr. Raghubar, I don't think that it is my experience that when you make your declaration, you confront. You're being not dramatic, but I will not give it the nomenclature of confronting. But certainly it has been done in other countries. I do not know. This is my first week, so I do not pretend to be an insufferable know-it-all. So I would have to acquaint myself more with that process, Mr. Raghubar Singh, before I comment on it. But I will not say that what exists now is the issue of confrontation, but the issue of the declaration. When I go, it's a strange mindset. I am now acquainting myself with the digital age. So when I don't have to do it, I wonder what is going on, because in some countries, in Dominica, you don't have to fill out the forms. And I still looking for those forms to fill out, not knowing that it has passed already. So it is something that I need to look at, acquaint myself with the landscape before I make a pronouncement on it.
Minister, thanks for being with us this morning, and we wish you all the best with you on the assignment.
Member Richards, let me say to you, I will miss you at the JSC National
Security. Who is your replacement?
He did not tell you all he's the vice chairman, and when we have questions, Mr. Richards says to me, I have 2 more questions, but then he whispers on this, but these 2 questions are divided into 3 parts. So the 2 questions, they morph into 6, that is 1. Mr. Raghubar Singh, I hope that you will not have to confront any officer when you have your declarations made. Mr. Stevens, I will not air in public.
I corrected myself, Minister. I said they politely ask, because they're always polite.
I would hope so. And
that's why I said they politely
Thank you very much for letting me know that my appointment was with you this morning. For some strange reason, Mr. Stevens told me it was tomorrow, but I'm glad that you still remain constant and you informed me that it was this morning.
Minister Scotland, let's meet in our usual place now, right? And
yes, sir. Gentlemen, I need to go to do the work of the people.
The work of the people.
May I be excused?
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Senior, for being with us.